Hello, and welcome to the How I Healed podcast. I'm joined today by my co host, Mary Lou Singleton, who is a family nurse practitioner, herbalist, and apprentice trained home birth midwife. Can we start over? I feel like that
Yeah,
was
totally.
terrible. Okay.
Do you want to we don't need to
Yeah.
hit record. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the How I Healed podcast. I'm here with my co host, Mary Lou Singleton, who is a family nurse practitioner, herbalist, and apprentice trained home birth midwife. She's been caring for the health of New Mexican families for over 25 years. Mary Lou believes all healthcare modalities, from allopathic medicine to energy work and everything in between, have healing potential. That healing is always an individual journey to be supported by community, and that when it comes to healing effectiveness, oh,
I should put a comma.
when it comes to healing, effectiveness is the measure of the truth. She is a critic of the pharmaceutical industry and the mainstream medical. You know what? I think that was worth starting over. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
So
do too.
one
Yeah.
more time. Okay.
Yeah.
It'll be easier to edit. Hello, and welcome to the How I Healed podcast. I am joined today by my co host, Mary Lou Singleton, who is a family nurse practitioner, herbalist, and apprentice trained home birth midwife. She has been caring for the health of New Mexican families for over 25 years. Mary Lou believes all healthcare modalities, from allopathic medicine to energy work and everything in between, have healing potential. That healing is always an individual journey to be supported by community, and that when it comes to healing, effectiveness is the measure of the truth. She is a critic of the pharmaceutical industry and the mainstream medical industry, which promotes drug dependence and chronic disease maintenance rather than healing. She believes healing is always possible and co created the How I Healed podcast to share stories of healing, hope, and recovery.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I am here with my co-host, Jocelyn McDonald. Jocelyn McDonald is an artist and storyteller. She is enlivened by the infinite potential of humans to heal and helps others to walk this path through her art and music. Her healing practice focuses on helping others heal through making and I didn't print out the one we finished. Is this correct? Yeah, I printed out the wrong one, Jocelyn. Let me get it back.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay. Do we have to start all over?
Yeah, no, not I don't have to start over. I'll just do this.
Okay, got it.
And that's for you to start over.
All right. Where is my, and now I can't find, oh, there we go. So sorry, Jocelyn.
No worries.
No, this is the correct one, right?
I don't know. You didn't finish your sentence, so I don't know where you were going with it.
Her healing practice focuses on helping others heal through making and finding meaning out of the crises and major choice points of their lives. She also offers one-on-one support for psychedelic integration and pharmaceutical cessation through coaching, archetypical astrology, and tarot.
No, that's
not it. Why?
Yeah, because that's the one that's kind of implying that the only thing I do coaching for is psychedelic integration, and so it needs to be the one that
How did I lose it? Oh, we did it in because I did it in the email. And I was going to read it off my email.
Yes.
Got it. All right. Sent inbox. Huh. Jeebus. Okay. I'm sorry about that, Jocelyn.
Don't be.
Okay. All right, I'll just read it off of here and I'm going to make it big. Okay. All right. So how should I just start to say thanks, Jocelyn? And I'm Mary Lou, and I'm here with my co-host, Jocelyn McDonald. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. We can always workshop it in future apps, but I think that sounds good.
Okay. Thanks, Jocelyn. I'm Mary Lou, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Jocelyn McDonald, who is an artist and storyteller. She is enlivened by the infinite potential of humans to heal and helps others walk this path through her art and music. Her healing practice focuses on making and finding meaning out of the crises and major choice points of our lives. She offers one-on-one support through coaching and archetypical astrology and tarot. She specializes in assisting with psychedelic integration and pharmaceutical cessation.
Yeah, we got it.
We got it. All
we
right.
got it.
Okay. Good enough. All right.
So, on today's first episode of the How I Healed podcast, we are really just introducing why it felt so important and exciting for us to work together to create this podcast.
Right. I have been wanting to share stories of healing in this format for a while, and wasn't really coming together. And then you and I were hanging out, Jocelyn, and just talking about the importance of sharing stories of people recovering from conditions that the mainstream medicine system tells us are not curable, correct? And we decided, we both have this passion to share these stories and to really shine a light on the fact that healing is possible and that people do recover. And the best way to do that is to embrace your own story. And one of the ways we can do that is to hear other people's stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is a topic that you and I have been somewhat obsessively talking about for many years since we've known one another. And I think that, over the course of this podcast, listeners will hear both of our own healing journeys, inside and outside of the allopathic medical system. But part of what brings us together on this topic, in addition to our own experiences individually healing, is this awareness that when we look out at the society that we live in the United States, so many people are engaging with medicine in a way that feels really backwards to how medicine ought to be used. And for me, what this kind of means is that I would like for medicine to step in when people are experiencing crises in their health in such a way that they nevertheless maintain their own sovereignty and their own personal agency in the healing process, where they aren't seeking an authority to take away their problems, but are co-creating their health with the support of people who have lots of experience and knowledge in doing so. And instead of that model, what I see is people going to experts who almost curse them by giving them a diagnosis that they then come to identify really strongly with. And I say that because that's partly what happened to me. I was diagnosed with several things that I came to identify really strongly with. And once you carry that identification, you will submit to all sorts of things that would violate your own agency without even framing it that way. You no longer see it as an issue of sovereignty or agency because you've kind of handed over your healing to an authority figure or an expert. And that will pave the way for you to be surveilled by doctors through invasive tests and imaging that, of course, comes with potentially harmful side effects that you'll submit to surgeries potentially, or pharmaceutical prescriptions that might address symptoms but never really manage to address the root cause. And the root cause is often not even in question. We don't look to achieve a state of healing that allows us to live freely without intervention. We look to interventions to maintain us. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. Mary Lou, what do you think? Would you add to that?
I would agree with that. And because I am, my goal is to help people heal. If that authoritarian model that you're describing actually was resulting in healing, I would support it. I think that if that was the way to truly get better from all of these chronic conditions that are plaguing our people, our fellow humans living in, we're both in the United States where we are especially chronically ill. If that was actually healing us, I'd be a fan of it. And instead, what I see is, we have this authoritarian model of healthcare where you present yourself to the healthcare provider, of which I am one. I am an allopathic medical provider. And you get your diagnosis, and then you get medication to manage that condition for the rest of your life, is sort of how that's set up. Most of these drugs, we don't have any exit plan within medicine for ever getting people off of them. We're considered, chronic disease is forever. We all know that too. If you've ever gone in the hospital for a procedure, you go into the system, like a mainstream corporate healthcare system, for even an urgent care visit, when you get your notes, every diagnosis you've ever had is listed on there, right? You can't shake these chronic illness diagnoses, even if, you were once told you were type 2 diabetic, but your blood sugar has been completely normal for 15 years without medication. You still are considered a type 2 diabetic for the rest of your life, where you still, like my notes still say asthma, no matter how many times I tell people I no longer identify as having asthma. I'm not sure I ever, like I had symptoms that got called asthma, but I no longer feel like that's something necessary to put on my medical records. But you can't get that off of there, because the entire system is based on chronic illnesses forever, and we're going to manage it forever with medication, and that is healthcare. And it's not working. People aren't getting better. And a large percentage of our population, that system is working for them, in the sense that that's what they want. It's what they understand. When they are in distress, they seek that. And I do, have many patients where that's the model we practice. But my joy and my goal for all humans is true healing. And I love it when people come with this understanding that I want to heal and I want assistance with that. And what that means to me is at the end of this process, I will no longer have the symptoms and identity of this condition that is now causing me distress.
Yeah, I really love what you said. And it was kind of encapsulated in our introduction too. Effectiveness is the measure of whether or not a health intervention is working. And so often when we look at the maintenance of chronic conditions, how could you call it effective if you can never get off the medication? It's kind of bonkers. I mean, is that too simplistic? It's just kind of bonkers that we would sign up for a lifetime subscription, because it seems so patently obvious that we've been turned into customers. Like if we have even a little bit of cynicism here, then we would see that our disease is enriching individuals and corporations.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to me that that's a controversial take, that, it's the healthcare sector is the biggest sector of our economy. It's a growth industry. It's getting bigger and bigger. And the more sickness there is, the more money there is to make. Yeah. And there's no money in healing. There's temporary money possibly, but there's no long-term money in someone getting better and freeing themselves from daily pharmaceuticals. And it's interesting because it is such a minefield to discuss. People's health is literally the most personal topic we could be talking about. And there's so much, there's just so much sensitivity around that I do want to say that I'm not a person who stands in opposition to people taking pharmaceuticals. I feel like I am a free will activist. I feel like people have a choice to do what they want to do. I think that in the short term, those medications can alleviate suffering. I'm pretty clear with people that in the long term, they don't create healing. And that's just something we need to be honest about. But I'm not standing in judgment of anyone at whatever place in their healing journey they are. And I think that it's not my place to say what's the right healing path for anyone. But my love and my passion in my life is to work with people who do want to liberate themselves, and health is freedom, right? To be in a state of health is freedom. To not be dependent on corporations is freedom. To have a clear and sober mind is freedom. And that is what drives me. What drives me is not to stand in judgment of this industry and the people engaging with it. It's to really shine a light for people who would like to move away from that and let them know that's possible.
I really like what you said. It brought up for me some thoughts about where I stand, especially on pharmaceuticals. I've become a hardliner where I myself won't take any pharmaceutical drugs, including ibuprofen. And it got me thinking about in my experience, that's been kind of a reaction to the number and diversity of medications that I was prescribed and taking on a daily basis. But I have the same orientation that you do. I think that everybody has free will to take pharmaceuticals, and it's not for me to judge which kind and how many. And I really like what you said, because I think that there is an important role that pharmaceuticals played in my own healing journey. If I had not taken those 10 different pharmaceuticals at those different times, would I have ever gotten to the place where I am now, which is fed up with pharmaceuticals? Probably not, And so that was a really critical part of me accessing a greater personal freedom. If I hadn't had that experience, then I would not have pursued my own sense of freedom without pharmaceuticals. And it also triggered something in me too, because, I don't think I've ever told you this, Mary Lou, but something that I saw you post on Instagram, Facebook, probably in 2013 or something, about ibuprofen, was one of the first things that triggered something in me to question my reliance on ibuprofen. So I've always had extremely bad periods, and they were, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and there were years when I would take the maximum amount of ibuprofen on my period, and I would pair it with Tylenol, and as I made my journey away from pharmaceuticals, not because of ibuprofen, but because of, way heavier drugs that I was on, I started to really question ibuprofen, because I identified a way in which it was me numbing out my experience of my own body. And I am part of what is causes me to be so critical of pharmaceuticals for myself, is that I don't want to numb the sensations of my body, because I think that they're important. I think that they have a language that they speak in all their own, and that for me to hear that language, I can't numb out. And I think that as I grow and heal, I'll probably get to a point where I can happily take the occasional ibuprofen or the, Sudafed or whatever, without having to be so reactionary or controlling about it. But I would really encourage people who who are like walking this journey, to think about in what ways they don't have the tolerance to experience the sensation of being embodied, because it requires a high tolerance to be embodied. Like a lot of sensations are going to arise, and sometimes we have no choice but to numb out. Sometimes like those cramps are literally so bad that you won't be able to get things done in your life. And because our lives are, contain external constriction, that we can work to modify, or we can work within, but like nevertheless, like let's say, you just have to take a road trip one day on your period. Or I remember a friend of both of ours, Amy, was moving house on the day that she had her period. And you don't get to opt out of moving all of your belongings onto a truck with you and your 5 children and your husband just because you're bleeding. Like, that's the day that it fell on. Today we're going to drive a moving truck 800 miles, and that has to happen with the help of ibuprofen, because it's not possible to be fully embodied, experiencing the high sensation of those period cramps, and support your family and be with your family in the way that they
Right.
need. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We have to figure out what our tolerance is, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much there. We are a drug dependent culture. I was just looking at some of the statistics this morning that over 60% of adults in the United States take pharmaceuticals on a daily basis. Many take more than one prescribed pharmaceutical on a daily basis. With children, it depends on the age group, but among little kids, we're getting over 10%, 12% of young children are taking medication on a daily basis. And then as you get into the adolescence, whenever children start identifying with these, the medicalization of what used to be called angst, and what used to be considered normal identity development is getting medicalized, that now we're at the point where over 50% of our youth identify as mentally ill, and many of them are taking daily pharmaceuticals. So yeah, we are a drugged culture, and I think that your cold turkey approach is the right one for many people to step out of that and just experience what it is to not be drugged, because that's a rare state right now.
Mm-hmm.
When you were talking, I was thinking of the certain things that I do continue to occasionally drug myself, and
Why do you drug yourself? What are the
well,
conditions under which you're like, yeah, I'm ready to numb out?
okay, my seasonal allergies are one where, and that's something that I really should focus more on healing. Like I am at this, I have to, examine my own medicine, my own healing path, and be like, why do I tolerate that? Why am I not working harder to heal this condition that causes me a lot of suffering that I've seen other people heal? I know other people who no longer have seasonal allergies. What would it take for me? I know what it would take. It would take like some major dietary changes that I, for some reason, I'm not interested in implementing at this point in my life. It would probably take a lot of psychospiritual work about not feeling safe or at home in this world. Is right. My understanding of allergies is my body is defending myself against something that's not actually a threat.
Wow.
And yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, that would be exciting psychospiritual endeavor to unpack all of that. There are other modalities, acupuncture, NAAT, things that
NAAT?
NAAT. I never remember exactly what the N stands for, because it's the last name of the man who invented it, and the AET is allergy elimination technique.
Okay.
And I know many people have healed very serious allergies with NAET, and it's a process that involves time and money and commitment. And I've seen it work. I think it would work for me. I just haven't made space for that. And I should look at why not, because my seasonal allergy symptoms, at least twice a year for at least a month at a time, cause me a lot of suffering and distress. And I often treat them with herbs, with freeze-dried nettles, which work well for me, or I'll take quercetin. And sometimes I just break down and take over-the-counter antihistamines because I'm so miserable.
And you have to live your life.
I have to live my life.
Slow down. Yeah.
Right. The other thing I occasionally drug is I do occasionally take an ibuprofen, if I'm in a lot of pain and I need to get things done, or I can't sleep. I'm talking, far less than once a month, a few times a year. And again, I don't have judgment of anyone else. This is just about my healing process. But when I do take an ibuprofen, I really sit with it and think about my ancestors. And I think, my great-great-great-grandmothers would have loved to get their hands on this stuff. This would have been a gift. And I take it out as a way of honoring them for the days that I know they were having to push through horrific pain and continue to tend to many children and do chores that had to get done or no one could eat or drink that day.
Right.
And think, here's to you, Grandma. I'm gonna take this and hopefully, if you know, in the quantum field, like, you'll feel me being grateful and loving of you for, you know, I love my ancestors. I love what they endured to allow me to have my turn here.
I really love that, and I appreciate it so much. I think that really encapsulates so much of what we cannot approach this question of when to seek outside authorities or outside help through a lens of judgment, either of ourselves or of others, because the process of self-healing must begin first from a place of accessing self-love. So you can't do that while you're judging yourself. Like those two things are incompatible.
And I would say you can't do that when you're judging other people either.
Yes, absolutely.
It's, you know, and those of us who've wrestled with that kind of judgment, whether, you know, if we grew up in like harsh religious practices, I know that's how I ended up with a lot of the judging behaviors and mindsets that have brought me suffering through my life. I think those of us who've wrestled with that and worked to heal that come to the understanding that my judgment of others is always because I'm not liking something about myself that's being reflected in them. And so really healing that is, I think, an important part of many of our journeys, to just be in a place of acceptance and love and observation. You know, I'm practicing that lately, of just being with people and yeah, not being rigid and dogmatic.
Oh, wow. Oh, just hearing that, my shoulders relax. God, I love the expansion process that I've been going through to be less rigid and dogmatic. Thank you, COVID. Thank you, COVID, for awakening in me this this flexibility around my ideologies.
Right.
I really want. Oh, go ahead.
COVID brought me to such an examination of not really like of not knowing what the truth is, you know, and how
yes,
so much of, again, I'm a nurse practitioner. I am well versed in mainstream allopathic medicine. I know what the standards of care are. I know the rationale behind it. I don't judge people who want to take that path. I've never believed it's the only path, but COVID made me start judging everything of this sick until proven healthy mindset of we don't know if you're healthy based on how you feel, so we have to test and test and test. And that made me start examining, oh, that's true in so many places. We see that very much in prenatal care and birth, and I've been aware of that for decades, but it's made me question all of it, of how all my dogma around it, as well as all my, like, it's a very humbling thing to come to the point of realizing we live in a propaganda state, and I personally don't know what's true about a lot. What do I know is true? Love the children, take care of the mothers, be kind to each other, mitigate suffering where you can, eat good food, drink clean water, get some sun. Like, these things have always been true. I believe that. And I just try to stay with, like, okay, what do I know is true? Because anytime we get rigid and dogmatic, for me, that sets me up for, I'm going to have a pretty big, dogma burn or reckoning.
I'm about to be humbled.
Yes,
Life's about to humble me. Yeah, I really love your list. I think I couldn't possibly change my mind about any of those things, like taking care of the children and the mothers and enjoying the sun. But about everything else, I want to keep an open mind and be willing to change my mind. And that's not a matter of that's a matter of wisdom rather than suggestibility. So one of the things that I was wanting to, there's so many things from when you were talking about your allergies that I really want, I don't want to lose. And I don't know how structured I want to be in this podcast too. I don't want to ramble or become too tangential, but I did want to say that, you know, when we were talking about the COVID stuff and the sick until proven healthy thing, it's not just with COVID. There's so many things like that. And I think that when you go to the doctor these days, the experience is a lot like seeking help from the Hierophant. In the tarot deck, the Hierophant is like the Pope, and he's the authority that connects you to God. And without that conduit, you can't access the love and forgiveness and salvation of the divine, right? So
Right.
when we go to the doctor, we are asking for an intercessor between us and our perfect, whole, healed bodies, our the integrity of our bodies. We're looking for the intercessor. We're willing to confess our sins, and they will be extracted from us. I mean, how often have you gone to the doctor and experienced the feeling that you're in trouble? And it starts when they put you on the scale and they're like, okay, BMI.
Right,
And
right.
then it just continues, like how, they never trust anything you say. And of course, why would they? You often have to lie, like, no, I never smoke casually because I wanted to talk to somebody on the porch. Like, no, I don't ever do that bad thing. So we set ourselves up to be judged and to seek absolution for our many sins. And so we think we're going to the Hierophant, but what actually ends up happening is we are encountering the devil. And in the tarot deck, in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Hierophant is pictured with, he's a pope in his stately robes, and there's two monks at his feet, and they are, asking for his attention and maybe absolution. The devil card is very, very similar in its imagery, in that a central figure features two figures at his feet. And so the devil card features a naked man and a woman, and they're bound in chains. And I see this connection with the doctors, because you think you're going to be to receive intercession, and what you're actually doing is getting hooked on something. You're getting hooked on the belief that there's something wrong with you that modern medicine can cure, and you're often, very often, getting hooked on drugs. And it's like, we think about addiction to stuff like meth, or even pharmaceutical, highly addictive pharmaceuticals like OxyContin or something like that. But we often don't think about the addictive features of maintenance medications like Wellbutrin, which is almost impossible for people to get off. It's so addictive. Or even stuff like ibuprofen, where there is no change to your behavior or habits. It's not causing you to, betray yourself or your loved ones. It's not disrupting your life, but you also can't live without it. And so there becomes an addiction to the disease identity, and there becomes an addiction to the special pill. And
which is that enslavement of our free will.
Yes.
Which is what my understanding of the devil is in many different traditions, right?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for pulling that thread. Yes.
Right. Absolutely. And when you're talking, being having been raised very strict Catholic, and here, like that connection between going to the priest and going to the doctor, and we have to confess our sins, and you're right. Like growing up and having to go, from the time I was 7 years old, I think everyone who's raised Catholic will relate to this story, that, you receive your sacraments at age 7. That's pretty young. And you, including the sacrament of confession, where you have to go confess your sins, and you're 7, you're 7. Sins. And like, you're trying to, I remember sitting and trying to think of like, what am I going to confess? But at this point, you've been raised Catholic, so you feel guilty about everything. Like everything's, you have to go confess that you like yelled at your brother and you stole your sister's Halloween candy, and these things you shouldn't be doing. Like they don't make your life nicer or easier. But instead of it being approached as like, you're engaging in behavior that isn't creating health and functionality for you, you're taught to feel like you're a demonic, sinful person.
Yes.
And you're
going straight to hell.
You're going to hell unless you go talk to the guy who can forgive you, and you give him your list. And then he would usually tell me to go say some Hail Marys, or sometimes like the progressive young priests would be like, your penance is to help your mom with the dishes tonight, or your penance is to clean your room without complaining. And that was a little more helpful. But nobody ever was like, hey, what's driving you to steal your sister's Halloween candy? Like how do we get at the
Oh,
root of this behavior?
thank you. Thank you for bringing it back. Yes.
How do we get to at the root of this behavior that's causing suffering in your life and the lives of those around you?
Yes.
And what needs to change to stop that? Because I don't think guilt and shame and punishment were working from when I looked like at my own, my own like peccadillos, versus like major actual sins of people who are really severely hurting others. Even then, I mean, some people do need to be removed from society, but guilt and shame and punishment isn't going to heal what's driving it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we bring that to health, like, yeah, you present yourself to the priest-like figure of the person with the license who can dispense the communion of the medications. And there often is a guilt and a shaming, but it's the same thing. No, we don't have time to really discuss nutrition. Mainstream medical providers really don't know much about nutrition anyway. We don't address, we give more drugs for the addictions, right? We don't address what's driving you to smoke those cigarettes, what's driving you to drink the alcohol. It's no, like, here's drugs to substitute for that drug. So yeah, and all of those, this is why I'm not a fan of authoritarianism. I don't believe that it creates health and liberation for humans.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you tugged on that thread too, because it brought me back to the other thing back from our allergy conversation that I really didn't want to miss, and that is that my experience in healing myself outside of the medical system has completely and fundamentally changed the way that I view the origin of disease. And when we talk about the root and getting to the root of our symptoms, and how little modern medicine is even concerning itself with the root, I really think about that. And I would love for us both to dive into to our beliefs about that. But one thing that as you were saying, that about allergies and how it would take psycho-spiritual work for you to heal that, was just really, it was landing for me. That's another thing that we have deeply in common, because I think that all of our disease, I think that, me, Jocelyn, I'm not going to say that anybody else has to believe this, and I know that most people don't believe this, but my belief, through encountering German New Medicine and traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, and Jungian archetypes, is that all disease originates in the psyche. Other than poisonings or injuries or exposure to toxins, all disease originates in the psyche. And therefore, while there are thousands of interventions that will help and support us, like herbs or pharmaceuticals or surgeries or whatever, any of our diseases could be healed solely through the power of our own mind. And this is really supported by the placebo effect and by lots and lots of studies of people who do different meditational methods. But I just think that when we look at problems like as simple as allergies or the common cold or painful periods, if we approach it from the belief that we have the power to heal it, and that we already have the tools in our own genes to make that healing happen, then we are off to a good start. And we can always seek out things that will help and support, like herbs, like pharmaceuticals or anything like that. But knowing that we have those tools is kind of, for me, the baseline of getting to a life where we're symptom free, because without that belief, you have nothing.
Right.
That's my take.
No, I think that's beautiful. Absolutely. And I also believe all healing is a psycho-spiritual process. And again, this is my belief. I am a free will activist, and I do not enjoy having the beliefs of others pushed on me, and I work hard not to push my beliefs on others. am also like a loudmouth, opinionated lady. So people, they
Yeah.
hear me freely expressing my very strong beliefs and often hear that as me pushing my belief on them. But that's not my
Yes.
intention. My intention is I want to express my belief. And if it resonates with you, that's awesome. And if not, you don't have to believe it. You're free not
Yeah.
to believe it.
Yeah.
So I believe what gets denigrated and dismissed as the placebo effect is the best thing we got going for us as a
Absolutely.
species, and
Yes.
and it's tragic for me to witness people be just, like it's a pejorative to hear the term the placebo effect is as a pejorative term, like, oh, that's just the placebo effect. The placebo effect rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to, like, as words get denigrated and change, like we're watching the changing of language so much, we've seen it in our lifetimes of how hobo and bum, those are terrible words, so we're going to say homeless people, and now
Yeah. Okay.
homeless is a slur, so now we're saying the unhoused. And it's like,
Unhoused.
do we have to come up with a new word that's not the placebo effect, because the placebo effect is a slur
So
now?
denigrated.
And
Yeah.
I don't want to engage in that, but I do want to get to the truth that we are naming with that word, which is our body can heal through the
Yes.
power of belief.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
we are social animals, and our belief in each other's ability to heal also heals.
Okay. Yeah, I just got chills all over my body when you said
Right.
that.
Right. And that if I trust someone and if that person has my back and I trust them and I know that they are a source of healing in my life, and I come to them in distress, I will receive some degree of healing from whatever they offer me, if that is a person who loves me.
Mm. Mm.
If,
Yeah.
right. And I think that
Yes.
this is part of the relationship that gets broken, is that it is considered unprofessional for healthcare providers to love their patients. And I'm not talking about like be their best friend, or I certainly am not talking about engaging in romantic or sexual
Oh, no.
relationships. Like again, love has been denigrated as something, but we are here to love each other and to really be invested in each other's well-being, right?
Yeah.
um and that piece is broken, that a lot of people don't trust their medical provider and don't feel loved by their medical provider. And a lot of
Mm.
medical providers have disdain for their patients just from the way
So
the
much
system
disdain.
is built. So that often isn't helping. But even in that broken system, often the pharmaceuticals are working through a placebo effect, because desperation and faith, and people believe it will help, and they do get help from it. But I don't
Yeah.
want to, again, I don't want to focus on that broken part. I want to get back to that. Yes, if I'm in distress and I trust you and I love you and I come to you for medicine, whatever medicine you give me will provide some healing benefit to me,
Mm.
because we heal and we can help each other heal.
Yeah.
Right.
I really think that yeah, we can heal and we can help each other heal, and to kind of connect the dots with the state of belief when we are in a state of crisis, or our own self our self-conception has turned to disease and helplessness, we can turn to others to hold the frequency of health for us that we are not in a position to hold. And so when we go to somebody who has this belief in healing, that's their dominant frequency, that like healing exists, that there's a state that is symptom free, and where your body is free of um, the constraint of disease, then we're invited to join them on a higher vibrational level. And I know how insane and woo woo that sounds, but when you say that, like doctors are not connected to the first point, which is love, because they're discouraged from doing so. I mean, it's like wrong to love your
Mhm.
patients. It's considered like you should be pretty much disinvested
Mhm.
in someone else's experience, because that's unprofessional. But really, the the type of love we're talking about is not enmeshed or in any way codependent. It's that frequency of acceptance of all, rejection of none. The frequency of compassion, where you can look at somebody and say, I see all that's wrong for you. I accept all that's wrong. And I encourage you to join me in this other place where all the wrong things can be left behind. I don't know. Does that sound psychotic? And like, I know that I sound like a tarot reader right now. It's only because I am. It's only because I'm that woo-woo.
No, and you know what? I'm sure that's medicine. Whatever came, just, that just came through you is medicine. And yes, that place of, how do we be in a place of, aren't we all striving in this world to be in a place of love? Isn't that what all the holy books tell us? To love one another, love one another. That's what we're instructed over and over again. And that's, it's a worthy goal, and that's a healing goal for sure. So back to that, we talked about the placebo effect, but I want to talk about the psychospiritual story and how, again, for me, this is my truth, that I believe it's a mythic adventure to be an embodied soul here.
Oh, God. Yes.
And that life is a gift, and that we are all living our personal, very important story. And I think that our bodies are the vehicles that we live that story through, and that our bodies are always telling what's going on with the story, that our bodies are telling a story. And there are other, Gina Correa has written about this. There's, the very popular book, The Body Keeps the Score. There's Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. Like, this is not like, this is not a truth that I alone possess, or that is in any way, new or exciting. It's something many, many people have believed for a very, very long time.
And yet we do need to emphasize that it is a truth. I mean, if you want to, like, I know how woo-woo some of this stuff sounds, but it's all backed up by lots and lots of evidence achieved through the scientific method, the same scientific method that's used to conduct all the rest of these medical, all the rest of the medical and pharmaceutical research, like what you're talking about with The Body Keeps the Score, and Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No, the placebo effect by Joe Dispenza, like all of these things can factually and numerologically represent in hard data the effect of belief on health.
There's another book, The Biology of Belief. There's Candace Pert's work. Candace Pert discovered the endorphin receptor. She's award-winning biochemist, and she was a pioneer of the field, psychoneuroimmunology, talking about how there is no such thing as the immune system. The immune system is the communication network of the entire body. And that she was someone who used reductionism to argue against reductionism in medicine. And yes, all of this can be expressed through that paradigm and that language. The older I get, the less interested I am in backing everything up with the dominant scientific paradigm. And the older I get,
just say that for the skeptics, just in case they think that we're out here just making shit up. But I mean, all of this is like fact checkable. Like, there are receipts.
Yes. There's so much. And I would feel like if people are skeptical, then, if it's not for you, it's not for you. For me, healing comes from figuring out what the story my body's telling is, and healing that story of finding, like, okay, if I were reading a myth about a woman who's had these things happen to her, and now like this is her body is now covered in a rash, and she's coming out of her own skin with itching. These are things I've experienced. I'm like, oh, well, what does that mean? Like, what is that as a metaphor in this story that I'm so blessed to be living, or if I'm blessed to be witnessing it in another person? And I have my own beliefs of how I would interpret other people's symptoms in terms of the story of their life, but it's not my place to do that. Each person, like, I might make suggestions and say, hey, if this resonates, run with it. If not, we'll just let it fall. But only the individual experiencing the symptomology can figure out what it means in their story, right? And I think that's where the healing comes from.
Oh, Mary Lou, I love hearing you say this because I've known you so long and I consider you such a close friend, but I'm learning in this conversation how much more we have in common than I even knew. And of course I knew, like, because I've seen the way that you engage with myth and the mythic inside of us and outside of us in the larger world, in the cosmos itself. I know that you carry this deep wisdom and like storytelling capacity, but I had no idea the way that it works its way into your work as an allopathic provider. And it feels even more resonant that we like share this podcast together, because obviously as an astrologer and tarot reader, myth is the container and the language through which I make meaning of the various crises that arise in my own life and that of others. And so for me, myth and this this language of archetypes has been very healing. I think a lot of people would wonder how an astrologer and a tarot reader could consider themselves a healer of anything other than the psychological realm, rather than the body. But for me, my body has been healed of these various diagnoses and symptomatic patterns in large part through meaning making, because of its capacity to change belief and to challenge the thoughts that we think on a habitual basis. We think these thoughts over and over and over until they become beliefs, and then the beliefs dictate what we how the world operates to us, because at the end of the day, our reality is created from our individual beliefs, both on an individual level and a societal level, I should say, on a community level. But yeah, I guess I just feel so inspired to know this about your healing practice right now.
Thanks,
I'm in awe of you. I love you.
Well, it's completely mutual. Absolutely. So should we wrap this one up? And
No, I have one more thing. I think we really have to talk about. We've talked so much about I don't want to hear it, Kat. I don't want to hear it. Get out of here. Oh, do you hear him?
I don't.
It's 12:15. He ate breakfast, a huge breakfast, and now he's coming in here to beg.
This is his mythic story. That's what he's expressing.
He's always hungry. So one of the things that we were speaking about before we started recording the podcast, I really just wanted to touch on together, because I think it's another shared point of how our healing practices overlap in really beautiful ways, even though they are very, very different. And I just want to dive in a little bit to birth and the importance of birth and the way that we structure our beliefs about healing crises and their alleviation.
Oh, right. I just have to breathe for a few minutes, because I feel I have so much to feel and think and express about birth. And anyone who knows me knows that I am a midwife. I was on fire. I had a true calling to midwifery from the time I was born, from the time I can remember. I remember being like 3, 4, 5 years old, and all I wanted to do was to help women have babies. And that got turned into, oh, that means you want to be an obstetrician gynecologist, and a windy path to that. But so it is my primary love and joy. And honestly, it's also my very strong belief that birth is the most important issue. Birth is not a side issue. Birth is not a niche issue. Birth is the issue when it comes to humanity and healing and culture, because birth is literally the rite of passage into this life.
I've heard you say on other podcasts that you can tell a lot about a society by how it views birth. And that really opened my mind a lot.
Right. Because birth is the entrance into a society, into a culture, and our prenatal and birth practices will reflect everything that is all of the belief system that is held strongly within that culture. So what does our culture believe? We're very scared of life and nature and anything that we can't control. We worship science and technology. We want everything to be measurable and recordable and numeric. We don't like it when things are mysterious. We don't believe, if something's mysterious, we don't believe in it. We dismiss it and say it's unprovable. So yeah, we are now living in a time, we were talking about this before, I mean, since the industrialization of birth, which started in the early 1900s and really took off after World War II in this country, by 1950, over 95% of births were happening in the industrial model, in the birth system. In 1900, the numbers were exactly the opposite. It was 1 to 5% of births happening in the hospital. By 1950, close to 100%. And not just happening in the hospital. It wasn't like women just moved to the hospital and then the same process happened there.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, right. It became truly an industrial process where women presented themselves to the authorities, who were at the time all men. Now we have women in that role as well, but it's still an industrial model, and turn their bodies over to for the process to be managed. And by the 1950s, the entire culture recognized that doctors deliver babies, the hospitals deliver the product of babies, deliver humans to our society. We could go on. There's so much to say.
Women don't deliver the baby. The Hierophant delivers the baby.
Yes. The Hierophant delivers the baby. The system delivers the baby. Yeah. And that, it sounds cliche and trite, but one of the ways I feel like that is so obviously expressed in our culture is that when we talk to women who gave birth in the mainstream medical system, they describe their entry into motherhood as when I brought you home from the hospital.
Yes, right? That is profound.
Like, we've all heard countless people say that, but when you talk to a woman who's given birth at home, who's given birth undrugged, under her own power, not being managed by authority figures, she never says, when the midwife left and it was me leaving, it was now my job to take care of you, or when the midwife put you in my arms, or anything. No, it's like when I birthed you. Like, it's a continuous, she does not have a separation between that seamless transition of gestation, labor, delivery, birth into your arms. You're still one person with the placenta still attached to you. I mean, most American women, the cord is cut seconds after birth, so they don't even get that liminal state of you're still one but you're two. There's so much that we've been robbed of that's a part of our natural design as a species, is being interrupted every day, all day long, in the industrial birth model. Can I keep going? Like, other things we've lost?
Course. I don't think we need to worry too much about time. Joe Rogan's podcasts last for like 3 hours. So if people are tired, they can just turn the fucking podcast off or come back to it later.
Absolutely. Right? Thank you for saying that. Totally. So what else have we lost in this transition where we've decided birth is a medical process to be managed and drugged by authority figures? For nearly all of human history, birth was the realm of women. Women birthed in the presence of other women, and sometimes those were women who were in that role in their community as midwives, as women who were known to be, that's their role, to be there to attend birth. Often it was your mothers, your sisters, your aunties, the neighbor woman. Like, women helped each other give birth. And birth was women's work. And like all of life, birth sometimes entailed death, and not every birth resulted in a healthy mother and infant. And that was distressing to people. And I think that probably were, loving human intentions behind this desire to interfere in birth, of wanting no one to ever die during birth, was probably this impetus for men wanting to take control over birth, and women wanting to hand it to somebody. But I do want to say that birth works really well. And for nearly all women, birth was not a tragic, traumatic process. It was just a human process. It wasn't a medical process. It was just what women did. I look at my own line. Both of my parents were born at home, not because their parents were hippies, but because they were born in 1929 and 1930 rurally. And both of my grandmothers had just fine deliveries. My maternal grandmother, had 11 children, and my paternal great grandmother had 16. Like all of these births happened at home. And there were no immediate infant losses. There were losses in the first year to diseases and to, that's not true. My maternal grandmother did have a stillbirth. But those things continue to happen now. We haven't eliminated things. In fact, our birth outcomes are terrible in the United States right now. They're not.
Oh, absolutely. And not only are our birth outcomes terrible, but so many women talk about their humiliation and degradation in the hospital and experience the entirety of birth as humiliating, which is insane because birth is the most empowering experience that a human being could ever experience. I mean, how could like you are the portal between worlds. You just face down pain and death and discomfort for hours and hours and came out of it stronger than ever. Like it's a transformation for women to turn women from maidens into mothers, to prepare them for all the, I've heard, not that I am a mother, but I've heard mothers say so often that once they got through birth, then they knew that everything that comes up in child rearing, which is very difficult, of course, is they're reminded like, well, I can do this. I birthed, so I can do this. Like, okay, like, yeah, you have chicken pox. This fucking sucks, but I birthed, so I know I'll figure it out. Like, oh, we're poor. I only have one job and your dad left, but I can figure it out because I birthed.
Right. Exactly. For me, that has certainly been the case. I know for most women who have a consciously planned natural birth, that's the case. We find our strength in that experience. It's amazing. And you know what, like all of life, there are no guarantees, and sometimes it doesn't happen. And I think we all spend so much time protecting and reacting to the sensitivity of traumatized women that we feel like we're not allowed to celebrate the empowerment of birth and how that's the norm. That should be the norm. It is designed to turn us into fearless, amazing mothers who are crackling with our own power because we know we can accomplish the impossible. And it's a gift to have such a rite of passage because parenting is intense. Life is intense, right? And so the women are broken now. Like we are living in a culture of instinct injured women. I don't want to say the other thing.
Instinct injured. Let's really let that land. Instinct injured women. And there's also an effect on the babies because the babies need to be squeezed through the portal, and they need, and like there needs to be that, in archetypal astrology, and really in all astrology, the first step in astrology is casting the birth chart. And that is not just the story of a person's life, it's the story of a person's birth too. And you can describe every event of the birth through the aspects of the planets and where they fall in which signs and in which houses. And especially in archetypal astrology, we look to the outer planets to describe the stages of birth, from unity with the mother, that's Neptune, to the hard constraint of late pregnancy and the beginning of contractions, that's Saturn, to the portal where the baby thinks it's going to die because it's being squeezed so hard it has no, not the babies think, but if a being has any consciousness at all, it knows that like something kind of bad is happening, like I'm being squeezed, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. That's Pluto. And then to emerge on the other side free and in a completely new world, that's Uranus. And so we can see that same portal in so many parts of our lives. Like when we experience the death of a loved one, we'll experience those 4 stages. When we go to college and we're starting out at college, we'll experience those 4 stages. When we take psychedelic drugs, we'll experience those 4 stages. You know what I'm saying? So like
Right.
birth is something that babies need to experience too. It sets us up for a lifetime of repeating the pattern of those 4 stages of unity, crisis, death, and rebirth. And that, I mean,
Right.
you can see it everywhere. You could see it every day in different events.
Absolutely. It is a rite of passage. And it's so infinitely frustrating for me to see all of the people with their analyses of what's wrong with our culture, forgetting to look at birth and refusing to look at birth because of their own trauma around it, their own fear of women, their own fear of birth, their own fear of life, their own fear of death, their own allegiance to the medical system, on and on and on, their own inability to examine how they themselves are affected by the trauma of their own births. But I'm thinking right now of Jonathan Haidt's book, the Coddling of the American Mind. And I just was reading that, and I agree with so much of what they are saying of why are our young people so fragile. And the whole time I'm reading it is like, when are they going to get to birth and the over medicating of childhood? When are they going to get to it? When are they going to get to it? No, they never got to it because they're allegiant to that paradigm of the medical management of all of human life. And they probably haven't even examined it, but they are clearly allegiant to it, or they would see it for what it is. That what happens when we try too hard to make birth safe is we end up with people who are terrified of all of life.
Wow. What happens when we try to make birth safe? And birth is as safe as anything in life.
Right. Birth is as safe as life ever gets.
Yes, yes. And so you're really setting yourself up for a lifetime of antagonism between you and death. And the reality is that we came here to have all of these life experiences, like to go back to what you were talking about, the mythic, and how all of our lives we engage in the mythic in order to process and experience this world. As humans, we're just born storytellers. We're always engaging in meaning making and the creation of symbols. But my point is that, what is my point, Mary Lou? I don't know. I lost it. But you know what I'm saying? It's like um we we came here to have contrast and conflict. We did not come here to live in safety and security. We came here to be free and expressed and to learn. And so the experiences that we go through, including disease, injury, pain, crisis, that we, whether physical, mental, or spiritual, we are always healing from the moment that we emerge from the unity of the womb. And some of us are sick even in the womb. So, this, it starts even earlier. But every day on earth, we're seeking to heal and come back to the fundamental truth of our unity between like self, body, and God. And in order to continue playing that cycle out over and over and over again, that's why disease comes in. And disease is not therefore a bad thing. Disease is really like fundamental to the process of exploration of our consciousness as individual beings. We go through these periods in order to expand our consciousness and our relationships to one another. It's not a bad thing to get sick. It's not a bad thing to face down death.
No, and it's not a bad thing to die. It's going to happen to all of us.
Oh, thank
and
God.
If we always
we got there.
If we always view death as a failure, which is our cultural paradigm of, when we saw that very much through COVID, of like, if someone died, it's because someone broke the rules. Very much in the mainstream medical system, it's like, who did something wrong? Who can we sue? If somebody died, it's obviously the failure of somebody, or it's the failure of the patient for eating poorly or not being adherent to their meds. Like, death is viewed as a failure, which sets us all up for failure. It's a no-win game. But again, if we come back to what is true, what has always been true, as we're trying to discern the truth in these crazy times where we don't have a unifying story as a culture, right? So what has always been true? All roads lead to certain death.
Yeah, and I think that one more reason that it's so important for me to engage in healing work and in co-creating this podcast with you is because of my firm belief in the goodness and rightness and correctness of death, that our lives are precious and finite, and that we came here to live a brief time, to learn a bunch of things, have a bunch of experiences, and then croak. And I think that one of the things that I find most disturbing about life in modern day America and really this new world is the resistance and fear of death is permeates everything, to the point where transhumanism, or the belief that we could merge with machines to distance ourselves from the suffering of embodiment and the eventuality of death, is absolutely evil. I think it's truly, like, to go back to myth and symbol, it's the devil. It's lies and truly evil. I mean, to engage with death as if it were something to be deleted, it drives people to absolutely inhuman interventions, like where the technology that's introduced into the healing sphere is ghoulish, where people are taking crazy medications that are filled with God knows what, and developed out of weird mouse or pig genetic modification, and then gene spliced with human genes, and there's also like all sorts of surgeries to essentially create bionic humans. And I'm not even talking about like for limb replacement, I'm talking about like the bionic nature of life extension, which is everywhere now. People are actually out here in public talking about how they want to extend their lives into the hundreds of years range, instead of being happy with life as it is, which is basically perfect. If you're happy and connected with your community, life is pretty sweet, but it's not good enough for you. You need to be, engaging in all these really ghoulish and inhumane technologies to eke out a few more years of self development, because none of this has to do with connection. None of this has to do with preserving your relationships. None of these people give a fuck about like still having a relationship with their aging parents. They're thinking about like, how many more things could I invent, or how many more places could I travel, or how many more experiences could I soak up if I just didn't die.
Right.
So I'm going to live forever.
Right. And then like you were saying with the transhumanism of people literally wanting to achieve that immortality through uploading their consciousness into the internet. And to me, as someone who was raised terrified of hell and had to literally like exercise myself of that devilish idea of like, I'm going to go to hell because because I'm 7 years old and I stole my sister's Halloween candy or whatever it is, eternal punishment. I'm like, oh man, uploading my consciousness into the internet to live in the internet forever is hell.
That is hell.
That is hell. Like that is not something I'm interested in at all. To me, that sounds like hell. So it's, this fear of death, this fear of mortality is so fundamental to our culture. And what I've noticed, and I noticed it so much during the COVID era, was that people who live their lives terrified of death really don't like it if you're not afraid of death.
Ooh, they also have a lot of willingness to dehumanize others in pursuit of their own self-protection. And so that's really, really divorcing yourself from your ability to be compassionate and connected to others.
Absolutely. And they are willing to, like you were saying with the transhumanists, like they're willing to sacrifice human connection if they're being given this, what I consider a false promise that they won't die if they sacrifice human connection. Like people were willing to, keep their children away from all human interaction because they were so afraid of death. Like they were willing to sacrifice living because they were afraid of dying. And that's not rational, And then,
it's cruel to children. I mean, the things that it did to children, stunting children's speech development, stunting children's social development, and the things that it did to the elderly. I mean, people's parents died alone and no one gave a fuck. I mean, really, like that has to be reckoned with. That is true evil to like let someone die in isolation. I can't imagine the cruelty that you have to say goodbye to somebody over FaceTime. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like you don't care at all about about like holding your father's hand in his last moments. I cannot fucking relate to that. I truly can't. I can't even imagine it.
And I know the absolute human atrocity of what was done to the elders, and especially in the care homes, and to keep them in isolation and to not let the elders make their own risk assessment. That was the piece that was really, really difficult for me to witness. Was I'm like, if you're 85, yay, you won. Like every day is great. And if you
it's bonus.
Right. If you haven't reconciled with your own mortality by the time you're 80, you failed the test. I'm sorry. That sounds judgmental, but it's true. If you haven't gotten there where you're okay with your own mortality by the time you're 80, for one thing, it's a huge blessing to be 80. Both of my parents died relatively young. Getting old is a gift. It's a blessing. And if you've made it to 80 and you're not yet reconciled with the fact you're going to die and you're at peace with that, you failed the test. You're not a good elder. You didn't make it to elderhood. You missed the developmental stages that would have turned you into a wise elder. I'm sorry. There's always hope. There's always healing for you. But if you're going to continue to live in fear,
lifetime,
or maybe this one, there's always hope. Every day is a brand new start, right? Every day is a new chance.
Yes, so true.
But in the moment, you're not a wise elder. But what I saw was the wise elders weren't allowed to embrace their mortality. Many people in their elderhood would risk love and joy and connection with their grandchildren, knowing it might give them a respiratory illness, knowing in the course of human history, respiratory illnesses are a frequent cause of death of elders. This was not new news. Like we've known that for, I was raised with that understanding, just coming from a large extended family, that elders die of the flu. And, that was considered not the worst way you could go.
Absolutely. Yeah,
totally. But we obliterated all of that cultural wisdom. We tortured our elders under the guise of protecting them. We didn't let them make their own risk assessments and their own choices. Just because you're elderly doesn't mean you're no longer a human with free will. Like, when did we, that's a whole other podcast.
It's infantilizing.
Yes, absolutely. And then, I, as someone who questioned many of these interventions and was like, give me the data that this is actually going to be good from a holistic public health perspective, what we're doing, those questions were met with this accusation of, you want everyone to die. That's what I was told. Wow. You want everyone to die. You know what? I wouldn't say I want everyone to die. I, though, live in continual awareness that everyone is going to die. And a big part of my healing process as someone whose parents died when I was relatively young has been needing to embrace mortality and to understand that that's the truth of this life, is you will lose everyone you love to death unless you die before that process has completed itself. Like that. Yeah. That's what's going to happen. Everyone you love is going to die, and you are going to die. And do I want that to happen? I don't think that's even a useful question. That is going to happen. I love life, and I will do whatever lengths I can to promote longevity and quality of life in people, but I'm not going to pretend it's possible to cheat death or avoid death. And stopping living because you're afraid of dying is just really dysfunctional, unhealthy, tragic way to be.
I think that for me, the question that I would ask back is like, what is your desire for someone to die in integrity and with dignity? Where,
Mhm.
like, how do those values not weigh as higher on the list than just prolonging life indefinitely? I think like anybody who's ever seen somebody who's been resuscitated and intubated and stuff like this in the at their end of life knows that there are very painful, undignified ways to die, and to have life kind of forcibly extended can take away like a can take a transition that would have otherwise been peaceful and turn it to a violent, chaotic um mess that
Right.
is like not peaceful in any way. And
Right.
yeah,
We
I don't want everyone to die, but I definitely want everyone who's going to die to have a modicum of dignity and integrity in so doing.
And that's another place where our cultural beliefs come in of like, that phrase death with dignity
Hmm.
now is synonymous with state assisted suicide
Oh my
for
God.
so
Thank you
many
for
people.
saying that. I didn't even make that connection as I was saying it myself.
And that's a whole other topic, but we really have lost our end of life rituals as well. And that,
Mm-hmm.
while there have always been people who died young of illnesses and accidents, for humans who were blessed, and for many, many humans, life culminated in elderhood and then an understanding that this person is close to death. And no one knows, like birth, it's mysterious. We don't know what day it's coming, but we know
Mm.
to really honor and love and attend to and listen to this sacred person who's not with us for much longer. We do know that any of us could die any second, but if you're in the presence of an elder or a person with a terminal illness who has embraced the fact that they're at the end of their life, or if you're at the process of conscious end of life, time expands, and love is the only thing that's important, and you want to just be with that person. So whatever love, medicine, healing, interaction that needs to happen can happen, and you can get the fruits of that end of life experience. And we've lost that as well,
Mm-hmm.
during, and that was lost with industrialized medicine, then,
Yes.
and the funeral industry took away a lot of our death practices.
Mm-hmm.
But the hospice movement of the 70s, like the home birth movement of the 70s, was trying to
Yes.
bring that back. And now hospice has been captured by industrial forces. And the average time a person spends in hospice in the United States is less than 2 days now,
Oh.
because the medical industry tortures people with drugs.
Yes.
Like if we look at oncology now, they're
Tortures.
tortures. It used to be oncology, not that long ago, like 20 years ago. If you had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, you went to hospice.
Yeah.
Western medicine had nothing left to offer you. You either went to like alternative people, or you came to terms with the inevitability of this is almost certainly what you're going to die from, and you got your house in order and did hospice. Now with all of these new drugs, most of the money being made in oncology is in stage 4 cancer now. So
Right, exactly. So
they,
let's pump you full of
yeah.
drugs and radiation that is going to make every one of your days filled with vomiting and
Mm-hmm.
an inability to hold food down and an inability to engage with your family in any way, like standing up, walking around, doing like
Mm-hmm.
normal things. No, that's not for you anymore. Like you're going to be
Right.
bedbound.
And there's always some new hope they dangle, that's some incredibly expensive drug.
Mhm.
And I do know that for certain stage 4 cancers, there are medications that where people do have a quality of life.
Good.
That's not most of them, and that's
Right.
not all cancers. And I think this is where people have to look individually,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just be in this place of death is never acceptable. I'm going to fight, fight, fight. Like I hear that from so many
Yes.
people, like I'm not going to ever stop fighting. And because of that, they have horrible deaths where
Right.
they're taking one more drug after another. They're being told, oh, there's a promising new treatment. And you look at the data, and promising means these people got like 12 more days compared
Right.
to the people who weren't taking it. And what we've
and not
lost,
12 more days with their family, not
no,
12 more days of having fun and
no,
being able to have dinners or whatever, like 12 more days of being fucking miserable and tortured.
exactly. And we've lost that beautiful embrace of end of life and of death. And that's also hurting our culture, that we've lost birth, this rite of passage that turns women into mothers in the same way it does for every other mammal. And now we've lost like the beauty of death and the medicine of death.
Wow, yes. I
It,
really see that. Sorry, go ahead.
it's just tragic. It's tragic,
Mm.
this terror. And I see it over and over again of people get angry if you mention it's time for hospice, or
Mhm.
people don't, like, it's that place of where do you let go. Atul Gawande, who's a pretty mainstream medical doctor, he wrote a book called Being Mortal, which is about this. And
Mm.
even in that, he doesn't really quite get there of like, where's the place where you say, let's call it,
Yeah.
let's say, when I was a kid, hospice was like you had a prognosis of 6 months or less. And many people were in hospice for more than 6 months, but that was six
Hmm.
months of like magic and unconditional love and
Yes.
everybody around you
Being attended.
understanding, being attended to and knowing
Yeah.
like life is precious, every second is precious. No one wants to make that call now.
Mm. It reminds me how our death is such a gift for the ones who we leave behind. And what taught me that is losing my grandmother. I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. So when my grandmother was dying, I remember the last time I saw her, she was not entirely demented, but not fully intellectually there, but still there a little bit. And she, I sat down in front of her. I sat down at her feet and spread out my tarot cards, and I was explaining to my grandma that this was something that I was getting into, and I wanted to share it with her. I wanted to, show off a little bit my special cards. And in the middle of the conversation, she needed to go to the bathroom, and I had to pick her up and take her there and clean her up afterward. And there was this incredible gift in it for me, because I realized that since she didn't live with me in her old age, she lived with my Aunt Laura. I had never had the humbling experience of having to meet an adult's needs as if they were helpless in this way. Like, she was helpless in this way, and she needed me to caretake her in a really intimate way. And it was such a gift for me to have the experience of showing her love and devotion. She
Mm-hmm.
just really deserved my devotion. She yeah, she deserved it so much. And I love my grandma, and watching her die was so important for me, because it brought me to an awareness of the depth of my love for her. It brought me to an awareness of her impact on my life. And if if I didn't have that experience of having to caretake her in her helplessness, I'm not sure that I would have, if it would have landed for me, like what it means to watch someone deteriorate. And that is a really important preparation, because someday I'm going to deteriorate.
Mm-hmm.
And the gift that she gave me in like letting herself be helpless in my presence, letting me be the one to take care of her instead of a nurse, or some kind of like attendant, which is what happens when we pawn the elderly off to nursing homes and stuff, was this like deep connection to my lineage and my and the way I want to die, and the way that I want to be surrounded by my children and their children when I die, and to be in that place of honor, because my grandma deserved to be honored. She had lived an incredibly she lived an incredible life. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's just like this massive gift in the vulnerability of becoming decrepit and old and helpless. And the gift is for the people who are still alive. It's to teach us this humility and devotion and respect. And it's to prepare us for the transitions that we're going to go through inevitably. And I'm going to experience this again when my parents get old and decrepit and die. And I look forward to being the person that bathes their dead bodies. You know what I mean? Like they really deserve my attention. Ooh.
Really beautiful.
Crying.
Oh no, it's beautiful. And witnessing you describe that process and seeing just what, the way this changed you, it brings me back to the similarity to birth, the other rite of passage. We have the rite of passage in, the rite of passage out.
Yes.
And that's not an anthropological term. That is a material term. Like we're coming in, we're going out. Like these are our passages. And that unconditional love and that selfless caretaking of the new soul and the old soul are the same. Right. It brings us to that place of, the baby comes and you can't even believe how much you love this baby. And you're willing to be in service to, you're wiping the baby's bottom. You're attending to all the baby's physical needs because the baby is helpless. And then if we are blessed and lucky to live very, very long lives, there is a good chance we're going to end up in that same position at the end of our life. And hopefully there's someone there to love us up, at that end as well.
Yeah. And I think that one of, I was not able to be at my grandmother's bedside when she actually passed. I remember I was in Seattle and she was in Indiana. So I remember like shouting into the phone, like, I love you, Grandma. I'm so sorry I'm not there. And I think about, when people die, they're never gone. And it's, you could say like they're never gone because they live on in our hearts. And that's however pat it sounds, it's absolutely true. But for some of us, like me, I believe that my grandmother is still very much here. I mean, I've asked her to hold my hand sometimes when I've been in distress. I've asked her to visit me in my dreams. She sends me birds. She communicates with me from beyond the veil, still to this day. And I know that that is true for a lot of people. Like the dead never, they are not accessible to us. We can't have a conversation with them where it's a back and forth anymore, but they're not gone. And we are so much more able to access the dead when we are witnesses to every stage of their transition. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And there's so much healing possible in those transitions where, lifelong grievances, grudges, and hurts get dropped whenever a conscious death is underway. And maybe that doesn't always happen. Healing, you have to hold the realm of all possibilities, but the potential for healing and healing your entire lineage is enormous at a good death. And death is I know birth has become this like social experience for a lot of people, but death is a more social experience. Like everyone can come visit. And where birth, we really want to protect the space of that woman so she is not distracted by, like, a birth is about the woman and the baby. It is not a place for other people to find their healing, right? It's for those two people. That's not fair to the woman. It's not fair to the baby. Like, it's a very private event for us and every other mammal. Death for many is a more social community event where everyone who loves you, if you're having a good death, everyone who loves you can come and bring you love and receive your love and just get the last of the juice of your experience and put down hurts and put down grievances and have all that healing happen. And what a gift. It's not something to avoid at all costs. And how, again, like I feel the minefield of these conversations where I'm like, oh, people, Mary Lou Singleton doesn't care if people die. She thinks, she thinks death is great and wants everyone to die. And
It's so true.
And again, I want people to live healthy, wonderful, vibrant lives and experience really wonderful deaths surrounded by their loved ones. And
Yes.
that's what I want for everyone. And I know that's not, life doesn't work that's going to happen for everyone, but that is what I want for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, if I could give like the blessing to everyone I meet, it would be, may you live a long, happy, healthy, wonderful life surrounded by love, and may you die peacefully surrounded by love.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I just think that, I know we're gonna do, I'm sure we'll do many episodes that focus on both birth and death, but I do think that what you said before we started recording is so important, that health is life, all healing starts with birth, and all healing is completed at death. Death, like, is the culmination of all of our healing journeys, and nothing gets left undone. When you die, it's complete.
It's complete. Well, we should probably wind
Kind of
down
like this
there.
podcast.
Like this podcast.
It's
All right.
complete.
And thank everybody for listening. I really, really hope that that we're sharing medicine that's helpful to you, and thank you for bringing your medicine in the form of listening with us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thanks for being a part of our journey. And I also want to say that anyone hearing this who is feeling inspired to share their own healing journey should get in touch with us at our Gmail, which is howihealedpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to be a guest, or if you'd like to share your feedback about our podcast, where we would be delighted to hear from you.
Wonderful. And where can people find you, Jocelyn, if they're interested in your healing gifts?
They can find me at Aunt Flossie on Instagram. So that's Aunt, like auntie, at Aunt Flossie.
At Aunt Flossie. Great.
Yeah.
And if people would like to find me, I am at enchantedfamilymedicine.com. That is my website that describes my practice. Or you can follow me on Instagram. I am at Mary Lou Singleton, and I'm also on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And you're also on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter too. I forgot that I'm on Twitter, Mary Lou Singleton. I'm super active on Twitter, now known as X. So yeah, you can find me there as well.
And I also want to say that for those who would like to stay updated about our podcast and anything that we may be doing, you should consider joining our mailing list, which you can find through our Instagram, at How I Healed Pod. I think that's what it is. I could double check. Or our Substack, which is How I Healed. So we will we'll be putting that out on our socials in case I misspoke or said that wrong, or you can't figure out what the URL is. And we look forward to engaging with you and learning about your healing journeys.